Hey everypony, sorry I'm late. I wasn't able to do the whole, grimdark marathon that I wanted to do this October because, I was kind of busy with a bunch of stuff, and so I wasn't able to get any grimdarks in at all this month, so... But... yeah, but next year, I will definitely be doing all grimdarks that month. Next year, all grimdarks. You will be horrified next year. So, yeah, next year. So, anyhow, as I said last time, I was going to be reading Snip by Snip by Thunder Chaser Create. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm still going to do that, because I said that I would, and, blah blah blah, yada yada, so... okay, so yeah, let's get the ball rolling. Snip by Snip by Thunder Chaser Create. Rarity plodded through the muck, fresh mud sucking at her hooves. She was distressed by the terrible state of her coat and mane, but it would help to disguise her. She was grave robbing, after all. The top of a musty-tasting sack was in her mouth, the contents of which made not a peep as she pulled over a sharp rock. The bag split and a spray of rather red dirt fell from the small slice. The mare suppressed a whimper, trying to hold down her dinner as she continued to drag the sack through the deserted streets of Ponyville. The sky was appropriately dark, matching the malevolent scheme Rarity was attempting to get away with. Except, it wasn't really all that bad, what she wanted to do. All she wanted was to get her very special sun pony back in her arms where he belonged. Granted, Spike wasn't a pony, but she still had very strong feelings for him, and wasn't afraid to call those feelings love. Not afraid, that is, except in front of every pony. Yes, Rarity had admitted she loved Spike as more than a friend, but only to Spike. And then, that terrible accident. All that fire and smoke and ash. The memory still burned bright in Rarity's mind, and a silent tear slipped down her white cheek as she took the last few steps up to the door of her shop. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit and, while somewhat disorganized, sterile room. Rarity swung the sack in front of her, and it landed with a sickening thump on the hard floor. Rarity winced a bit at this sound, hoping that she hadn't accidentally damaged the remains in some way. They were already very badly burned, and nearly unrecognizable as the small dragon she had loved so dearly. Holding her breath, the unicorn opened the petrichoric bag and shook the ashen contents onto the floor as gently as she could. Accompanied by a few large crumbles of wet dirt, the body of the undersized dragon flailed onto the floor, then disturbingly motionless before her. The mare sniffed a bit, but reminded herself to keep the corpse as clean as possible. She carefully scooped up the limp body, right arm hanging off by little more than a thread. Funny, Rarity thought to herself, since that's exactly what I'm planning to use. She rolled the body onto the low table she so often used as Sweetie Belle's private play area, the bones and muscles contorting in ways they were never meant to. Rarity used her magic to light a small gas lamp over his head, then turned to her pile of instruments. An array of sharp tools were laid out on a small trolley, sewing needles ranging from applique-sized to the curved doll needle. She also had several seam rippers, a few fabric scissors, an old iron, and a variety of heavy-duty threads. The jewel-colored spools were lined up before her, and perfectly matched the beautiful shining scales the dragon once had. She had dug the colors from her memory, and, to her knowledge, she had the best eye for colors in all of Ponyville. Rarity neatened up the body, moving the remains to a nearly symmetrical position. Here or there, a scale was missing, which was what allowed the normally heat-proof dragon to get burned at all. The real mystery was the peeling quality of some of the scales, which she knew no amount of heat could cause. No matter. She didn't want to put anything before the welfare of her friend, and resolved to reflect on it later. Rarity's horn glowed with a sapphire light, and the largest doll needle was picked up and threaded deftly. The cotton thread was a bright purple that would hopefully match his scales as soon as they regained their color once more. The mare didn't even think of the word if. Her love was too strong, too great, that if this didn't work, surely she would die. Her heart ached so badly for the feeling of his cold scales against her warm chest. She wanted to hear his heart beating fast as he leaned into her, wanted to hear his tiny voice call her name. Rarity pushed such thoughts from her mind. This task required precision, not to mention how horribly unladylike it was for such thoughts to cross her mind. She took a deep breath, trying to stop her hooves from shaking and her magic from wavering. The dull needle hovered above Spike's left shoulder, preparing to steady the torn ligament and hopefully repair some of the skin as well. The unicorn squinted her eyes shut and plunged the needle through the skin between the scales. Nothing happened. There was no blood, no sound, no consequences. Rarity grinned proudly, realizing that she was capable of doing this, and maybe even completing the project tonight. She pulled on the needle, weaving it through the cracked scales and skin, and took a neat stitch. She quickly tied the thread in place and went about finishing the shoulder. By the time she had knotted off on the shoulder, the moon was high in the sky above the boutique, and the stars practically lit her work on their own. A bead of sweat or two ran down the mare's forehead, stinging her eyes, but she continued. She had to finish this tonight, or Twilight and the others might find out. Rain pittered rhythmically on the metal canopy which hung over the door. "Stitch by stitch," Rarity told herself. "Just one stitch at a time. You'll get through the night, Rarity. I know you will." She was stitching up his eyelid when the first beams of sunlight started to crawl towards her, almost crawling over the windowsill and slithering across the floor. "Done!" She congratulated herself, putting the tools aside and lifting Spike to eye level. He was still limp like a doll, but he looked much better, closer to the real him. Rarity knew there was one more thing she had to do. It might have seemed foolish, but it was important. She thought that maybe, through the magic of love that Princess Cadance had once taught every pony, Spike would be revived. She leaned forward, sighed deeply, and gave him the biggest, most passionate kiss she could muster. She pulled away, her eyelids fluttering open, and waited for Spike to wake up. But nothing happened. Rarity tried twice more, but Spike still stayed limp, resting on her hooves. The mare sobbed once, short and loud, and gave up. The stars were completely gone when Rarity pulled her sack outside. She dug a small, unmarked grave and put the bag inside, then buried it. No need for any elegant prose in this case. It was as simple as that. She tried to push the thoughts of last night out of her mind, as the voices of the Cutie Mark Crusaders reached her, demanding some type of nourishment from the overworked mare. Rarity let her hoof rest on the spot where she had buried her dear friend, but held back the tears for the sake of the young fillies. She pulled away from the patch of dirt reluctantly, sighed loudly, and headed back inside to clean up a bit of the mess that still left on the floor. It's a shame she left so soon, for if she had remained for a few moments more, she might have heard the struggling breaths of a small set of dragon lungs, as an impossible being died for a second time. Alternate ending. Rarity didn't care about the tiny voices that called for her. She stood over her true love, and a tear splashed down onto the tiny dirt before her. "I love you, Spike. I don't care what any pony else says. I love you with all my heart, and I only wish we had more time together." The mare stood diligently over the grave of the small dragon, watching the tear soak down into the dirt beneath her hooves. "Rarity!" Sweetie Belle whined from the doorway. "When are you going to make us breakfast?" "Oh!" Rarity quickly wiped her eyes and turned to her younger sister. Do you hear that?" Sweetie Belle interrupted her, looking at the unmarked grave that Rarity was standing over. "What's that weird sound?" Rarity gasped. Not caring what Sweetie Belle saw, she began to dig frantically, for the fortunate mare had heard the cries of a tiny, impossible dragon as he called her name. "Rarity!" The muffled sound came from below her. "Rarity!" "Well, don't just stand there!" Rarity yelled at her sister. "Dig!" The two sets of frenzied hooves unearthed the sack, and now Spike was screaming for Rarity, yelling her name through the burlap over and over. Rarity used her magic to untie the sack and lifted out the blackened body that was once Spike. Sweetie shrieked at such a sight, and ran to the door, shooing all the Cutie Mark Crusaders away from the house. She hollered something about zombies, but Rarity didn't care one bit. There were so many things she wanted to say to him, but all she could do was hug him close and sob into his shoulder. "Rarity?" the dragon whispered into her ear. The mare shushed him, but he asked again. "Rarity? What am I?" End. Well, that was a nice, short, little little story. Really, really feelsy. Made you cry, or made me cry, anyway. It was both the original and alternate ending were just so. But yeah. Okay, there is a sequel for this called Stitching It Together, which is a sequel for the alternate ending. And you know, I will be reading that at some point. I'm not going to do that next because, you know, it's kind of long, and, you know, I'm not, you know. So, I'm not going to do that for a while, but I do know when I'm going to read it, just not next. Just not next. Sometime in, like, February or March or something. I don't know. But I will be reading it at some point. So, anyhow, as for what I am reading next, okay, here's the deal. I will be taking the rest of this month off from reading for you guys. Not because I want to, but because I have so much that I need to do, that I need to take care of. I'm starting to fall behind on schoolwork, and that's not good. So I need to catch up on that. And I have a fanfic that I need to write for somebody. For like a little Christmas gift sort of thing. I'll be reading that at some point too. But you know. But anyhow, so my next reading will be in December, and that will be Luna's Hearthwarming Eve by Electrexcessive. And so yeah, all of December, I've got all of December booked as far as readings. They're all gonna be Christmas / Hearthwarming / December related. So, you know, so I've got December all booked up. So, I know what I'll be reading next month, but this month I'm gonna be taking the rest of it off to catch up on some things. And so, yeah, you guys won't be hearing from me for quite a few weeks. And sorry I have to do that to you guys, but, you know, life's a bitch. Is all I can say. It's a gift, but it's also a bitch. So. And also, for those of you who have made requests, don't worry, I'm gonna do them. They'll be. I'm actually planning to do those in January. So, you know, don't worry about it. I'm gonna do them. Don't worry. I said that I'd do them, and I'll do them. So, just be patient. So yeah. But yeah, until next time, you know, like and subscribe. You know, the usual, etc., etc. Almost forgot to mention. No bloopers. No bloopers for this one, unfortunately. Sorry, guys, no bloopers for this one, but, yeah. Anyhow, have a nice day.